Hi everyone, thanks for joining us from different parts of the world and welcome to Townscript's first webinar of 2019. I'm Akriti and on behalf of Townscript, I'm extremely excited to have Chris Robb with us today. Chris is the CEO and founder of Mass Participation Asia, also known as MPA, which is Asia's leading annual mass participation sports conference. Chris has been closely working in this industry for the last 35 years and has witnessed the transition of the industry at different fundamental levels. In today's webinar, Chris will share 7 common mistakes to avoid when creating successful mass participation partnerships that he has learned in the last 35 years in the industry. His presentation will include real-life examples of his experiences while managing millions of dollars of sponsorship from simple products to multi-million-dollar title partnerships. Whether you are an event organizer, a consultant, a student, or someone remotely associated with the industry, this webinar will help you to create not just partnerships, but successful partnerships. And don't forget to note down all the questions that you might have. In fact, you can start posting your questions in the chat as we'll address them towards the end of the session in our live Q&A. Thank you for taking the time for joining us today, Chris. We are eagerly looking forward to hearing your experiences. Over to you now.
Thanks so much, Akriti. Wonderful to be here. Thank you to you and Sanchit and the Townscript team, and to everybody that's joined us. We've got people from all over the world. You up very late at night in New York, through to people right across Asia, and I'm sitting here in Bali. So it's wonderful to be part of it. Welcome everyone. Good evening, morning, afternoon, wherever you are. I'm going to take my face off screen now, and I'm going to go onto the presentation and get straight underway and hopefully share some great information with you. Let me just work, okay. Let's turn off my computer, bear with me 2 minutes. Okay. Okay, as we've seen the title, 7 mistakes to avoid when creating a successful mass participation partnership. And I think probably be fair to say that many of us have been sitting on the wrong side of the branch like this gentleman. Hopefully our falls have been cushioned in some soft green grass underneath, but no doubt many of us have had, sometimes the best way to learn is by making mistakes. But my real hope is that during the course of the next 45 minutes or so, or probably 40 minutes of presentation and 20 minutes of Q&A, I'm going to help save you lots of time and bruises from falling from the wrong side of the branch, hopefully. I'm a real believer. I try not to use the word sponsorships. I focus very much on tailored partnerships. I see sponsorships as being quite transactional, and the real success comes from building tailored partnerships where everybody really understands what they're trying to achieve, both from a rights holder perspective and a partner or a sponsor perspective in the traditional sense of the word. I really believe that if managed correctly, these kind of partnerships can be a catalyst to transform not only your event, but your business. So I know we've got a broad cross-section of people on the call. Some of you are brands, some of you are events, some of you may be students. But if you take this partnership approach, it can transform what a brand gets out of an event, the impact that it has on their business, and what a rights holder can achieve. I'm going to take just a few minutes, if I may, maybe 4 or 5 minutes, to give you a little bit of my background and set the scene before we get underway with the 7 mistakes. I'm an international speaker, an author, an advisor to brands, governments, and events, and the founder, as Akriti said, of Mass Participation Asia. In 2015, I published Mass Participation Sports Events, the first of its kind, basically sharing my, at that stage, over 30 years of experience in the hope that I could help people within the industry to take some shortcuts and learn across a broad cross-section of our amazing industry. I've been incredibly fortunate to work with some amazing brands in that period of time and still continue to work with some of those. And it's given me so many great insights. Many of my learnings have come from my brand partners. As mentioned, I'm the founder and CEO of Mass Participation Asia, which I founded in 2015 with the objective of promoting collaboration and sharing best practice within our industry. We just held the 3rd edition of the conference in Singapore in December with 60 speakers from around the world and close to 250 delegates, and many great learning experiences and many great opportunities for people to collaborate. And one of our partners in that event was Townscript, which was wonderful to be able to partner with them. I'm really excited and massively enthused to share that I launched a while ago Mass Participation Masterclass, and it'll be a first of its kind, as I understand, in the industry. We'll be starting in mid-February, a year-long 12-month program with 12 different monthly modules with a small group of students from across the world. We already have people from Mexico, from Australia, from Singapore, from the UK, and there's a couple more opportunities still, but basically working with me on a mentor basis and on an ongoing basis with that core group of people to learn and take some of the shortcuts that I've been lucky enough to have now been able to accumulate over my many years in the industry. I'm lucky that I live here in Bali with my beautiful wife and son, Tet and Sam, and base myself from here and work around the region. My journey basically started growing up poor on a farm in Zimbabwe, and for those of you that follow the news, you will see the terrible things that have happened there recently. It was tough times when I was there, but nothing like as tough as it is now. And again, our industry gives us this amazing opportunity to impact people's lives, and my life was impacted without really knowing at the age of a 16-year-old that I'd be setting the foundation for a 35-year career. So I organized my first fun run. I used to be an 800, 1500 meter runner. We had a track similar to that on screen made of cinders. Our cinders had washed away, and I basically decided to organize a fun run to raise money to resurface our track, and quickly learned that I love impacting people's lives, the business elements of it, the community elements, and it took me on to an amazing journey, which ultimately, nearly 35 years ago, saw me arrive in Australia with $15,000 in my pocket. That involved setting up a home, starting work, and within a few months, founding my business. And I'm proud to say that I grew that business to a multi-million-dollar international business, organizing some of the biggest mass participation events there are, like the 60,000 participant Singapore Marathon. One of my career highlights was being the road event supervisor at the Sydney Olympics. And in 2003, JP Morgan, who was a client in Australia, asked me to help them to launch their JP Morgan Corporate Challenge in Singapore, and gave me this amazing opportunity to move to Asia, where I've been based ever since. I guess I'm incredibly privileged and proud to say that I've been directly at the helm for events of over 1 million participants, and obviously had the opportunity indirectly to impact millions more people's lives through charities, through improving the lifestyle of not only the participant, but often their immediate family, which I think is one of the great, what I call money can't buy experiences that our industry provides. Some of the biggest buzzes I get is being stopped in the street by someone saying, "Wow, Chris, thank you so much. You changed my life as a result of participating in that cycling event. I'm now a passionate cyclist and lead a healthy lifestyle." And I've obviously been, as a result of that, involved in managing millions of dollars worth of partnership over the years. In 2015, I sold my business to Ironman, and that enabled the opportunity for this next chapter, which I'm now in the midst of with Mass Participation Asia and my advising and so on. So my key aim today is really to help you, each and every one of you that's on the call, to avoid some of the mistakes I've made along the way. I'm going to share with you over about the next 30 minutes or so, 7 mistakes, as we've mentioned. I've got a bonus mistake for you at the end. And as we've already mentioned, there's opportunities for questions. So please don't hesitate, type them in the question box. And once I finish the formal presentation, I'll try and answer as many as possible. And if I can't get to that, we'll certainly give my contact details, and you can send your questions to me afterwards. So what about the 7 mistakes that I've identified? And there are many more than 7 mistakes, but I've tried to pick out 7 key mistakes for the time that we have. The first mistake is that of no research or use of data. And what I see quite often is this kind of shotgun approach to sponsorship. I've got a database, I'll send out a sponsorship proposal to hundreds, thousands of people and hope that they're going to turn up or respond to me and ask to be a sponsor of my event. The real key, I believe, is doing very detailed research to understand who it is that you're looking for, what your objectives are around your event. We'll talk about that a little bit later. and having this approach of a kind of less is more, speaking in a more direct approach to a small group of sponsors rather than this shotgun approach, researching exactly what it is that sponsors are looking for and what they need. I speak to sponsorship managers on a regular basis, and I'm quite surprised, or not surprised, because it's become an industry trend of how many of them say they literally receive hundreds of proposals unsolicited, which literally go straight into the bin. A complete waste of time because they haven't understood, they haven't even gone to the website to understand the sponsor guidelines. So many partners, sponsors have these guidelines in terms of what they will accept and what they won't accept. And people waste their time sending proposals through to them that literally get binned, whether they're a hard copy or an email copy. They never even get reviewed. So a waste of time on everybody's time. And then I think this great opportunity that we have, which is quite different to many industries in the mass participation industry, of gathering data on our participants. So if someone decides to go to a football match or a concert, they'll generally go to a ticketing agency, they'll buy a ticket, and that may be through Townscript. And the availability of data, whilst it's improving, doesn't often make its way to the rights holder. But as a rights holder in a mass participation event, you have this amazing ability at registration to capture a whole range, obviously within data protection laws and guidelines, a whole bunch of data. And then you have the data of participants in terms of their times and so on. And that is incredibly valuable to sponsors. So by understanding a sponsor's needs, having researched a sponsor properly and matching that with the data that you have access for, you can turn up with research on the partner that you're looking for and research that you have available to create a much more powerful impact and a much more powerful proposal that hopefully presents a much better platform for your partner to be able to engage on when you start moving forward, and to be able to get them engaged in the first place. The second mistake that I see, and it works on both sides, from rights holders, partners, and sponsors, is no clear objectives and deliverables on the side of both parties. And some of the things I'm talking about there, and there's a very short list on this screen, but some of the opportunities that mass participation events produce are product integration, sales leads, staff and client engagement, media exposure, content created, CSR initiatives, and branding. And I purposely put branding at the bottom of the list because I believe that branding as part of a mass participation event should be a given. And it maybe is a high priority depending on what a brand is trying to achieve. But so often I see proposals where people put branding as the most important thing that they're bringing to a partner. And if you change this mindset to say, how can I understand their objectives, which we'll speak about, and create something that is much more tailored to achieve other objectives with branding as a given, I believe that you have a much better opportunity of success. And then it's important to be confident of your ability to be able to articulate your objectives if you're a rights holder. And sometimes rights holders feel embarrassed about saying, I want to make a profit. And sometimes they partner with a brand that doesn't recognize the importance that very often a small business has to be profitable. And if we can work hand in hand with a brand and a rights holder to ensure that we deliver a profitable event, the event stays around longer, it becomes more successful, the brand benefits more. So again, this partnership approach rather than this transactional approach of I'll sell you a sponsorship and it doesn't matter what's happening over on the right-hand side with my business. You might have an objective as a rights holder where you want to have regional expansion, and you go down this path unspoken to your partner, and your partner after 2 years says, well, we're not interested in you expanding that concept regionally. Or you may be able to have the opportunity to work with a partner who really values regional expansion and helps you to expand. The number of participants, I've had many conversations where a partner really wants to drive me, numbers is most important, and drive me to the level of almost trying to make events unsafe so they can get another 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 participants in an event. So I think as a rights holder, you need to be clear of what the capacity of the event is, be able to speak your truth in terms of the impact that massive uncontrolled growth is going to have in terms of impacting the experience, which ultimately impacts the sponsor's brand. Content creation is an area where I think both rights holders and partners can generate huge exposure and huge engagement. Everyone that lines up on that start line has a story that can be used to create content that has the opportunity as to why did I enter in this event? Why am I running in honor of someone who died? Am I doing a triathlon to answer a challenge with my friends over a beer? Am I looking to raise money for one of my favorite charities, and so on and so on. And these all present incredible stories that can be turned into content. And then there's the opportunity to generate business leads and increase the profile of your business. But if your partner, who you might be signing up for, particularly a title sponsor partner who might be wanting to invest millions in your event but doesn't want you to build your profile or generate business leads, you've got to disconnect right from the beginning. And also making sure that not only are you clear on your objectives, but then what are the deliverables? What exactly is it are you going to deliver? And what exactly is it that your partner sponsor is going to deliver? I was just in a conversation with a friend of mine yesterday who is a very senior regional sponsorship manager for a big bank who's working on a golfing property. And he was sharing with me that the rights holder, he was very particular in detailing to the nth degree every benefit. And this rights holder is trying to back out a number of the benefits. And because they had documented it very clearly and it had been well articulated, it was much easier to sit down at the table and try and iron out the disconnect and put themselves in a position where they could move forward in a more harmonious state. So very clear, be clear on your objectives, try and look for commonalities, and make sure that you document the deliverables on both parts, so rights holder deliverables and partner deliverables. Moving on to mistake number 3, which is really one of my biggest bugbears, so to speak. I see so much of this standard package. I've got a gold, I've got a silver, I've got a bronze, and the standard package looks a little bit like the gift on the left-hand side. It's a box that's got 20 free entries, it's got 10 signages in it, it's got some hospitality, it's got your logo on the website, it's got your logo on a t-shirt and a bunch of other things. And the reality is that sometimes half of what's in your standard package is of no interest to the sponsor anyway, and you've just maybe compromised the sale by trying to sell them something that they're not interested in. So they kind of like look at it and say, I don't want half of that, why should I do that? And you've missed out on the opportunity of the step that I just shared before in terms of the biggest mistake of not understanding objectives. If you really understand objectives and are very collaborative in that approach, I believe you can take, which is my preferred approach, is the empty box on the right-hand side. And the empty red box signifies your event, whether that might be a grassroots football competition, it might be a triathlon, or an obstacle event. And with your potential partner, you then sit down and say, well, what should we put in this box? Branding should be a given, but how important is branding? Maybe staff engagement is really important, so they want 100 free entries so their staff can get involved in the event. Maybe client engagement is really important, so they want a hospitality suite and they want 200 discounted or free tickets for their clients to participate in the event. And when you understand those objectives clearly and you match them, you then have this opportunity to create this much more tailored package. And it's a process. So the shotgun approach that I spoke about earlier of sending out a 20-page proposal with a list of gold, silver, and bronze and the benefits at the end of it is a complete waste. My approach is, the box is, from a proposal perspective, if you even need to send one, as opposed to literally trying to get a meeting up front, you send a one-page placemat, as I call it, which articulates the key details of the event, and then you sit down over a number of meetings, and ultimately the detailed proposal of a number of pages with a list of articulated deliverables might come after several weeks, several months, and multiple meetings to come to this tailored solution that you've achieved that benefits everybody. So it's very much about a matter of educating both parties as well, getting the brand to understand what your event is about, getting them to understand what the opportunities are and discussing those in detail up front rather than discovering down the track that they had some idea of something that they'd like to do with the event that doesn't work. I'm not saying that it's not okay to have internal packages. You might have a kind of a structure where you say, you know, your most expensive tier is going to be somewhere between, you know, pick a number. If it's, you know, a title sponsor, $1.5 million and and your next most important is maybe 200 to 300,000, and you might come down to a range of 10 to 50,000, and those are kind of the indicative benefits that you're prepared to give to those. But it's not a matter of this kind of standard proposal that you send through as a gold, silver, bronze, much more tailored. Mistake number 4 is only focusing on the dollars. So whilst it's really, your eyes might light up when you see that big pile of US dollars on the left, sorry, so often you may be missing out on a great opportunity by looking beyond the size of the check that might be available. So over here, you've got someone that wants to pay you $1 million on the left-hand side, but they're not prepared to activate. They don't have some marketing channels. They don't have a bunch of regional reach, and you're going to get a check and not much more. And maybe they're going to be hard to work with. Over on the right-hand side, someone who might be prepared to write you a check of $500,000, but they've got a massive database. They've got a whole array of retail outlets where they're going to be able to cross-promote and market your event. They've got other partners that they might bring to the event. They might have broadcast channels. They might have digital channels which can add. And when you add the sum of that up, you're probably getting a value of, you know, maybe $1.5 million or more. But quite often people get blinded by the size of the rights check rather than looking beyond that to really try and understand what the other opportunities are, to understand that the fit is correct. Even though it's a big check that might be able to be written, you don't understand each other's objectives properly. It's going to be a sponsor that's going to crack the whip over you because they feel that they've written the big check and that they now own you. And in the case of a sponsor, it might be the sponsor that feels because they've written the big check that you should be, as the rights holder, you as the sponsor, are entitled to them jumping up and down, and it becomes less of a partnership than if you've gone for a more realistic dollar value with a whole bunch of ways to help activate that and add. And this kind of thought process, I believe, applies at all levels, whether you're going for your title sponsor or whether you're going for your official vehicle or your official hotel. Understand the other elements that come with the cash or the value in kind contribution. You might have someone who might be your official drinks partner who's going to give you all your drinks for free, and you've got another one who's going to give you all your drinks for free, but they're going to do a whole bunch of retail advertising and activation as a result of that, that's going to be able to really enhance the partnership and get you much more bang for your buck, so to speak. And so talking about those activations, I move on to mistake number 5, which is not integrating activations into the sales process. An activation is a really crucial element of any sponsorship, and often still particularly in emerging markets, I see a partner who signs a rights deal and doesn't allocate any activation budget to it. And you know, your activation budget will vary from market to market. You know, it might be, you know, ideally it should be $1 to $2 for every amount you pay in rights fee. So for example, I pay a $500,000 rights fee. I should allocate at least $1 million, maybe $1.5–2 million of budget to be able to activate that. $500,000 to $1 million, maybe even more, to be able to really activate and leverage my partnership. I had an example, and I take some responsibility for this process, and it's a great way to highlight it. I signed a deal many years ago with a hotel brand in Singapore for an event. It was an adventure style event, and I went to the sponsor afterwards looking for some water to put into the backpacks of all the participants. And their response to me was, we haven't budgeted for that water, we don't have any available. and an extreme way of showing that I hadn't educated them on the activation opportunities that were available around the event, and they hadn't given any thought to the fact of, I write a check and I need to invest some additional money to be able to activate my investment. And I have found over the years, and I'm going to share an example with you here with this next slide, that by bringing activations in as part of the sales process, you have a massive opportunity to create a multiplier of the investment that the brand brings to the table. You have a massive opportunity to take away conflicts and misunderstandings, because what will happen in some of the old-fashioned ways, and it was quite interesting, I was reading an article, an interview just a couple of weeks ago with Craig Jews, the CEO of Limelight in London, who are a fantastic agency in my opinion. And Craig was speaking about the importance of building activations into the sales process. And that's not typical in what we would see as a developed market. What typically has happened for many years is that a brand would sign up for a bunch of rights, and then they would go to their agency. Their agency, maybe a marketing agency, an advertising agency, would create some activations and bring them back to the rights holder. And the problem then happens with that it gets done kind of outside of the circle, and they bring a whole bunch of ideas to the rights holder, which then may not be able to be delivered for various operational reasons. So if you put a bunch of these ideas on the table, the sponsor gets excited about them. And this example of me looking very red-faced with a little bit more of a belly than I currently have is sitting on a bike with the brand manager for Berocca. Berocca, some of you may be aware of, an effervescent vitamin C, vitamin B tablet, which is it's a global brand, and I'd be surprised if many of you weren't aware of it. I got a call asking me if I would be able to send a standard package, a list of my standard packages, because Berocca saw cycling as an opportunity for themselves. My immediate response was, I don't do standard packages. Can I please come and sit down with you to understand your objectives? I ended up sitting for 2 hours with Eileen, and she said, this is the first time I've ever experienced this. We've invested over the past 5 years in a number of events by taking up their standard packages, and very few of them have ever worked. And this was at a support level. So we then sat down and we created a partnership where they came on board in a fairly traditional sense with the branding opportunities and the event day activations, the sampling and so on. And we created a month-long activation leading up to the event called the Berocca Challenge. Their target was the corporate market. They wanted to speak to C-level people, fundamentally busy people who wanted to get some, they wanted to market to get some get up and go from Berocca. And the idea was that you formed a corporate team, went into this cycling gym called Athlete Lab, and your team members raced different courses. And what you can see us looking at there is a screen in front where we're cycling up a course. And each week we gave out the Berocca green jersey for the team that was leading the standard, the timings. For those of you that are familiar with cycling, kind of a general classification. And then we had a semi-final, which was outside of the headquarters of our major bank sponsor. And the final took place on the event night as part of a professional criterium in our expo with thousands of people watching it on the big screen. So we'd added massive value to our event by creating this engagement with participants, an additional marketing platform. We'd added massive value to them in terms of their engagement, in terms of ticking the box. And we'd created it before we even inked the contract, and we didn't have to sign a deal and then wait a month later to decide what the activations were. And I'm very certain that the investment that they ended up putting into that event was somewhere between 5 and 10 times what they would have invested if they had just taken a typical standard package, which was being hawked around in the market in cycling events and running events at the same time. So a massive multiplier effect for the brand, a massive multiplier effect for us, and a great win-win opportunity. The next mistake that I'd like to share is one that I see very commonly, both from a partner brand perspective and from a rights holder, and that is understanding and allocated the resources required to service a partnership. And that's as simple as sitting down before the contract is signed as part of the discussion to say, well, when you come on board as a brand partner, these are the kind of things that we're going to need to work with you. We're recommending weekly, monthly, fortnightly work in progress meetings. We're going to need brand sign-offs on different bits of collateral at these intervals. This is the timeline leading up to the event. We're going to need things for goodie bags or whatever it may be, samples that are sent to you. You're going to have someone that's going to host your marquee on event day, and being very clear what the requirements of your partner are from a staffing perspective in the lead up, in the planning phase, and on event day. And at the same time, as if you're a rights holder, being very clear as to who the people are within your organization. Do you have the right account manager at the right level to be able to interact with the client that you've just brought on board, the new partner? I always recommend a single point of contact on both sides of the table. That doesn't mean that you don't have senior level contact at certain times and more admin level contact at other times. But if all your communication is ideally being channeled through one person, and you, again, when you're looking at that resource sourcing, do you have the right person that A, has the skills, but B, has the personal ability, the relationship building is going to gel with the person that they're working on the other side. They might be the most skilled, experienced sponsorship person that you have on your team, but there's a complete personality disconnect with the person that you're working on from a brand perspective, and you might need to readjust that. And sometimes that's fluid. You might get halfway through a relationship and find that the right person is not on the job, and you need to have some adjustments. Some clear documents to articulate your timelines, your dates for meetings, and so on, so that everybody can be very clear on what those resources are that are required. I had an example of that which was hugely disappointing. I signed a major airline as a partner in my event, and I signed them for a number of reasons. They were giving me only a small amount of flights. They weren't giving me any cash, but I was excited about the profile and credibility they brought to my event. I was hugely excited about the massive marketing channels that they were bringing to me, their databases, their digital assets, their in-flight magazines. But it quickly became apparent that their sponsorship and marketing and partnership team was massively under-resourced. And it's fair to say that in the wash-up, they barely delivered any of the benefits that they had committed to, whilst I delivered all of the benefits that I had committed to. And it was a really, really important learning to me that sometimes it's not what it looks like unless you drill down and understand what the staffing resources are that are required from everyone's perspective. Mistake number 7 is that of building relationships. And I'm not suggesting that you have to be able to hug every one of your partners and become the very best friends, albeit that after 35 years in this industry, some of my great friends are people that were former clients, current clients that I have built amazing relationships with. And certainly, I believe business and certainly sponsorship is about relationships. It starts really with the simple things. It's the regular catch up for coffee, maybe lunch, maybe dinner. It's remembering birthdays. It's maybe remembering birthdays or spouses' birthdays or those kind of things. It's maybe simple gifts. It's the simple things of saying thank you after the event, you know, particularly if it's a multi-year contract, but even if it's not. We used to get the habit of every single one of our partners would receive a framed photograph of the event with maybe a hero shot with general of the event, and then some shots which were specific to their brand. So if it was Volvo, for example, a picture of their car, maybe one of the CEO in the photo. And we'd always hold a great sponsorship little thank you event. That might be a dinner, it might be a cocktail party, and we'd present each and every one of our partners with those. And it was always gratifying to go in and see those things hanging on the wall, which became an additional marketing tool for us. Other people from our organization would come into the office, they would see an element of you, but most importantly, it helped you continue to build and extend that relationship. If you build a great relationship with your partner, it's inevitable in a sponsorship, particularly a multi-year partnership, that you're going to have some challenges. There's going to be some bumps along the road. And if you've worked hard at building a relationship, and friendships indeed, quite often it makes it so much easier to be able to overcome those. So being transparent, being open, being honest. When you hit a speed bump, picking up the phone. So if I go back to the Baroka challenge, in the very first week, there was a problem with the partner, Jim. There was a miscommunication in terms of how the timings of the participants were going to be captured. We'd made a commitment to Baroka that the results would go out the very next day, and there was a problem that was going to take 3 days to get the results out. I didn't make up an excuse and try and hide behind it. I picked up the phone straight away to the partner, explained to Eileen what the problem was, and we worked together to find a solution. Open, honest communication, building a relationship. And in this day and age, it's very easy when we all communicate through WhatsApp and emails and various other tools to not have that face-to-face and voice-to-voice. I really recommend that. Pick up the phone, have a conversation as simple as, hey, Eileen, how's the relationship going? Is everything okay? If it's not over a coffee, just a simple phone call. Are you happy with the way that the relationship manager is dealing with things? Are there any problems? Anything we can help with? Rather than her picking up the phone to me saying, hey, your relationship manager dropped the ball here, there's a problem, and things, it looks like you've kind of taken the check and you've moved away. So yeah, really key to build that relationship. And then, as I said, a bonus mistake that I'd like to share, and that's people that don't explore collaborations between partners. I think it presents the most wonderful opportunity, and I'm going to share a little case study with you here, which involves 3 brands. Volvo, recognized, I think, quite universally as one of the safest cars on the road. Uvex, a cycling helmet, and Symantec, Norton antivirus, which many of you would know. So Volvo and Uvex were existing partners. Symantec was a partner that I wanted to bring on board. The objective of Symantec was to get people to log on and try their trialware. Their key message was about safety and protection. And I came up with the idea, and this really doves in with a number of the different mistakes that I've shared already. Understanding objectives, building the relationship over a number of different meetings, building activations into the partnership, and creating leverage opportunities from the event. So I came up with the concept of the Volvo Symantec safety car. And the idea was that we filled a Volvo car with Uvex yellow helmets in the color of Symantec. It would be parked in the Volvo showroom and at various Volvo road shows around, so creating an activation amplification opportunity. People would have to go to log on to a holding page, or people would walk around, as Symantec staff would walk around at road shows with iPads where people could click on, put in their details, get a link to try the trialware for Symantec. And we got a massive amplification for all 3 of those brands, 2 of them existing and part of the event. And Symantec shared with me afterwards, in fact, during the meeting when I presented this, the Symantec brand manager said to me, Chris, my hands are sweaty. I'm so excited about this. It makes such a great combination, such a great amplification for us. And it was part of, a little bit like with Baroka, it was part of a number of other suite of benefits that I gave. So for example, it was a cycling event. Obviously, it had a bike compound where people could securely leave their bikes overnight before the ride. So we called it the Symantec by Compound with big amounts of branding around it. It was incorporated into all sorts of pieces of content, and the Volvo semantic car was parked next to it. So I'd created this multiplier effect. I'd brought a new partner on board. I'd brought additional investment from my existing partners. And we all know the story in business, how retaining and growing an existing customer is way cheaper than going and getting a new one. I'd managed to combine both of those by looking at the stable of partners that I had. So in summary, the 7 mistakes to avoid: making sure that you use research of your prospective partner and incorporate that with your data. Being very clear on your objectives and your deliverables, not overlooking them on both sides of the table. Getting rid of standard packages, tear them up and throw them away. Focusing on beyond the dollars to see what else a potential partner can bring to you. Being very conscious of integrating activations into your sales process. Allocating the right resources to the servicing process once you've signed the partnership, and that's on both sides of the table, a rights holder and a brand. And then building the all-important relationships across the different levels of the team. And one thing that I forgot to mention there is being very clear to understand that within an organization, the person that you are working with, who's maybe the champion of your event, has a number of internal stakeholders that they need to satisfy. So working with them to help them build their relationship with the managers of the different business units that might be needing to contribute budget to the project, for example. So very much helping them to build their internal relationships. And then the all-important bonus of collaborating between your existing partners to amplify. So my challenge to you is to think not about transactional sponsorship, but focus on avoiding all of those 7 mistakes to create tailored partnerships. And I have no doubt that with that, you will have the opportunity to create much more impactful events and in turn, a better bottom line. Sorry, I've got a freeze here, not moving forward for some reason. Just a quick snapshot again. I mentioned the mass participation masterclass earlier. I've shared with you 7 mistakes. The mass participation masterclass would have a whole month long. I'm doing a little bit of a sell here, excuse me. A month long block on sponsorship, and then talking about operations, risk management, course design, and so on. If it's something that's of interest to you, to work with me, learn from my 35 years of experience, be part of a career group globally with people from around the world to be able to bounce your ideas off and interact, drop me an email, Chris@ChrisRobAsia. I can share with you a webinar that I did on it. We could then set up a discovery call to understand your objectives, and then potentially you may be interested in signing up. That's my other details if you prefer to connect rather than via email. And we're now going to jump on and throw back to Akriti to manage some of the questions that we may have.
Thanks a lot, Chris. Very insightful observations indeed. And thanks for the bonus mistake as well. I'm sure the attendees found these extremely helpful. We do have a few questions already, and you can keep sending your questions in. So the first question we have is from Manoneet, who says, "Hi Chris, thank you for the informative session regarding your first mistake. You referred to the importance of data. Besides the data generated through self-research, are there any organized databases that contain data on players in the mass participation industry and their key attributes?"
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it's a real reflection of our industry that it's quite fragmented, and that is one of the things I guess that I'm trying to achieve through MPA is to bring people together. And yeah, thank you for the question, and I wish I could say to you, yes, go to XYZ and click on this link and you'll be able to find all of the players, but certainly it is quite fragmented and quite difficult to be able to. I think, you know, probably the best way of understanding who those people might be is to go to websites which list running events in terms of rights holders, and maybe looking at those events and then understanding who some of the partners might be. If you're looking for sponsorships, I'm not sure whether you're coming from a rights side or from a brand side, but that'll give you a bit of a sense of the people that are predisposed to being involved as a brand in partnerships. Hopefully that answers the question.
You can let us know if you have any follow-up questions. And next question we have is from Amarjot, who says, how can we have the right mix of standard and customized packages? I think this is in reference to mistake number 3 that you mentioned.
Yeah. Hi, Amarjot. My recommendation is that there's no mix, that everything is customized, whether you are looking at a title sponsor or whether you are looking at a VIK partner who's giving you your official car, your official water, whatever that may be. You really want to tailor those benefits because each of them is going to have a different objective. And by understanding what those are, you can create a package. You might have an internal package to say, okay, you know, for all of our official suppliers, for example, that might be cars, it might be hotel, it might be airlines. This is roughly the value that we expect from them, and this is what we're prepared to give them in return. But I think really in terms of going and saying, you know, I have a standard package and I'm going to sell that, I would really just encourage you to move away from that completely if you can.
And the next question we have is from Vikas, who says, Chris, how has your experience been working with JP Morgan versus working with smaller brands? Referring to your mistake regarding resources number 6, is it vital to clarify the requirements more so for larger brands?
It's a great question, and look, I think, you know, the answer is that certainly. Sorry, I just lost my screen here. Just put this back up again. Certainly, I think undoubtedly, if you're working with a really big brand who's invested a lot of money, it's going to be more onerous in inverted commas in terms of spending time with them, in terms of their requirements, as opposed to a smaller brand. But often the converse is true, because a smaller brand, particularly a brand that's entering into mass in the first place, doesn't really understand the opportunities, doesn't necessarily understand the challenges, and you find yourself in a position where you as the rights holder are probably educating them as you go along and sharing the learning challenge with them. So for example, the one that I used about the hotel, you know, that was their first sponsorship, and I took responsibility. As bizarre as it seems that a hotel who gives 2 bottles of water in every room every day wasn't prepared to put extra water in the room, they had a very tight budget. Free water, although it sounds free, is being budgeted for internally, and it was my fault, I believe, that I didn't communicate with them that opportunity that they had to be able to leverage their sponsorship by putting water that was hotel branded within the packages. So yeah, I think, you know, the reality is a big sponsor, big dollars, you're going to have to spend more time with them, but sometimes the smaller sponsors can be just as labor intensive. And also, obviously, don't forget that those smaller partners have the opportunity, depending on the category, of ultimately maybe one day becoming your title partner or a more senior partner. So, you know, building and nurturing, as you heard me share with the Uvex Volvo Symantec partnership, you know, maintaining an existing customer and growing them is way less expensive than attracting a new partner.
And the next question we have is from Sanchit. So Sanchit's joined the webinar as well, who asks how to solve the chicken and egg problem of first reaching out to the sponsors or spending the money to organize the event and building the brand first before reaching the sponsors as a first-time event manager.
It's an absolutely fantastic question. Hi, Sanchit. Thanks again for this wonderful opportunity. Great to have you on board. Look, I think it's one of the real perennial challenges of our industry. You know, many emerging event organizers have a great idea, and it was one, as you know, it was one of the topics that we had at MPA, from passion to profit, turning a great idea that's often a passion point into a commercially viable and commercially sustainable event? And I think the answer is it's a mix of both. You need to understand your risk profile. You need to understand the investment that you have. The reality is that in our space, it usually takes at least 3 years to build a profitable event. You know, year one, often significant investment. Year two, less investment, maybe break even. Year three, break even or small profit, and escalating from there. So with that in mind as a business model, before you even set out on the path, sometimes it's, you know, that requirement of, you know, maybe you need to shelve it for another year until you're ready to bring the right partner to the table to help you make it commercially viable. It's that need to have a partner who's prepared to take some of the risk with you. So, you know, when you have a non-established event, who's taking the biggest risk? You as the commercial risk taker, as a rights holder, or the brand that is potentially risking their brand reputation by a first up event failing miserably, you know, trumpeting that it's going to get, pick a number, 5,000 participants and it gets 1,000, and as a result, the whole experience is compromised. And that then comes back to many of the things that I've spoken about. It's relationship, it's understanding objectives, it's long-term objectives, it's taking the long play view. Our industry is not a short, quick fix, get rich quick type of industry, and I would encourage people who think that to step away from it now. If you think you're going to come in here, you make a quick mental calculation of 10,000 participants by dollars, by rupiah, by ringgit, by whatever the currency may be, you're going to fall flat on your face very quickly, because the cost of delivering these events and the time that it takes to build, and when they build and when they become you know, regionally and globally recognized, there's great opportunities, but it's certainly not a short play. It is definitely a matching. It is definitely a chicken and egg. And what is the chicken and egg? It's a combination. And you know, maybe the approach is that, you know, in the first years, it's a number of smaller partners. It's starting out small, so not biting out more than you can chew, so to speak. So rather than say, promise a sponsor that you're going to have 10,000, promise a sponsor that you're going to have 1,000, and you're going to run a small pilot, and you're going to grow it, and you're going to do it really well.
I couldn't agree with you more there, Chris. We have a couple more questions. Next is from Gagan, who says, can you please share this PowerPoint presentation or a slide of this, please? So I can probably take this one. Hi, Gagandeep. So we are going to share the recording of this webinar on our social media channels. So the slides will be available there. And
absolutely, no problem at all. Happy to help with that.
Mm-hmm. And the last question we have is from Avneet, who says, hi, Chris, your last mistake on relationships is something that most entrepreneurs talk about. Business is, after all, about people. What's your advice to new entrepreneurs who have limited relationships in their industry?
I think that the best piece of advice there is surround yourself with mentors that can help you with that. So mentors that can help with introductions, mentors that can teach you how to build those relationships. And again, a little bit like the last question, start small, go to your existing network. Don't be shy of asking for introductions and referrals. And don't be shy to pick up the telephone. What's the worst thing that someone can say? No. It takes great courage to be an entrepreneur. It's a wonderfully rewarding space to be in. You have the amazing ability to impact people's life in whatever space you're in, whether you're in mass participation or you're in other areas. But you need to be courageous. It is lonely. So surround yourself with a peer group and a mentor group that can help you with that. Go to networking events, you know, look at, you know, online, you know, social tools like LinkedIn and so on. But, you know, recognize that you start small and your circle of influence grows. And the most important thing I really come back to is be authentic. You know, if you're going out there thinking that you're just doing it for the sake of building the biggest network as quickly as possible, and you have this a little bit like what I started with in the beginning, with this biggest mistake of shotgun approach, just sending out a whole massive sponsorship proposals. It's the same with building relationships. You're better off having a handful of really tight, authentic relationships that you're building than being connected with, you know, thousands and tens of thousands of people that you're not interacting authentically with. Hopefully that answers the question.
We do have one more question, Chris. This is from Sushil, who says, "Hi, Chris. Thanks for the great session. Please share one more example of building collaboration between partners."
Okay, another one is around that same event. In fact, the event was called Cycle Singapore. It was a huge success in that it started with the first of its kind event, mass participation cycling event in Singapore. I think I'm right in saying the first year we ended up with 3,500 participants, and it grew to 2,500 participants. And as the event grew, within 2 years, we recognized that we were putting more and more cyclists on the road, and that was creating some safety issues in terms of education of motorists, in terms of education of cyclists. So we decided that it was our responsibility with our title sponsor and ourselves to be creating safety awareness. And one of the things that we do, I've always done with all of my events, is I hold regular every year sponsor workshops. So we bring all of the sponsors, partners together, usually at our partner hotel, and we set aside a half day or several hours to share the plans for the event and to bring everybody together to brainstorm ideas of collaboration like the one that I showed you. And quite often I'll come to those meetings pre-prepared with 3 or 4 or 5 different initiatives that I want to achieve for the event and see if we can get some buy-in. So as a result of that, we created this safety campaign where we had our garment provider, which was a company called F2P, who provided, I think it was 1,000 free cycling jerseys with our safety message on. We got the traffic police on board with some exposure. Our title sponsor, OCBC, gave some cash to help. We had a bike group that got involved in it. We had Volvo that got involved in it. And Caltex, who was one of our partners, and we created some decal stickers. And the message was 1.5 meter matters. So the highway code in Singapore and in many countries is you have to give 1 meter or 1.5 meters to cyclists when you bypass them. Unfortunately, it doesn't work in many Asian countries yet. I cycle in Bali and I love it, and most days I'm lucky to get 30 centimeters or 50 centimeters. So, you know, we're still building towards 1 meter or 1.5 meters, but we had this 1.5 meter matters. It was on these cycling jerseys. We had a National Safe Cycling Day, and that all came out of bringing this group of 6 different partners together at our sponsor workshop. I didn't have the money as the event owner to go and roll that out on my own, but by getting the collaboration of those groups, we were able to put together a program which had several $1,000s worth of sponsorship in it. We had street banners around town, and we had a significant impact on safety education.
Thanks, Chris. So before ending, could you please share a bit about your masterclass and what all do you plan to cover in that?
Thanks, Akriti. So yes, as I mentioned, it's a year-long program. There'll be 12 modules. So each module, each month there is a module. It might be sponsorship, as I mentioned, risk management, course design, volunteer management, all different elements of the event with a mix of operational and commercial, as I call them. And if you participate, there'll be a monthly that will run for about 2 hours on the topic of the month. There'll be content related to that. Every member of the group will get a weekly video and a weekly framework. So fundamentally, I've shared with you a framework today for avoiding mistakes. Every week you will get something along those lines. So for example, I have a 13-step framework for venue selection. So by the end of it, you'll have 52 frameworks. You'll have 52 video tips from me. Every month, there'll be an interview with someone within the industry. So if it's a sponsorship module, it'll be a leading sponsorship expert. If it's risk management, it'll be a leading risk management expert. There'll be one-on-one mentoring sessions with me. So every month you get about an hour and a half with me to share whatever it is. And, you know, it depends where you live. I obviously spend a fair bit of time around the region. If you happen to be in a city that I'm in, I will meet you face to face, but mostly those will be webinars. There'll be an accountability group on Facebook where you can share ideas, hold yourself accountable to your objectives, input from me on that. It's a free copy of my book. It's a free delegate pass to next year's Mass Participation Asia Conference, which will be in Singapore on the 2nd and 3rd of December, immediately after the Standard Chartered Singapore Marathon. I think that's it. So yeah, a whole package with a whole bunch of benefits aligned with it. If you're interested, make a contact to me again. I'll go back up to my, said thank you here. There's my contact details. Drop me an email. I can send you a link to a webinar that I've done on it, which articulates all of these details. And if you're then interested, we would set up what I call a discovery call, where we would have an hour together, where we would, I would understand what your objectives are to help you build your business and share other details of it, and then sign up and we move forward. The first session, the first presentation will be on the 12th of February. So we're about 3 weeks out from starting, not too late for people to sign up. We already have people from afar afield. There's Mexico, England, Australia, Singapore. And the idea is that it will be a group of peers that will be learning together and learning from me, taking my 35 years of experience.
This sounds really exciting, Chris, and I've already received messages from attendees asking more information on that. So anyone who needs more information on that can write to Chris directly, and you're more than welcome to write to him about expressing your interest as well. On behalf of Townscript, I'd like to...
Very excited. Sorry. Yeah, I'm super excited about that. And also just, you know, thank you everyone who tuned in. Some great questions. If I didn't get to your question, if we ran out of time, please feel free to email me at that email address or contact me through LinkedIn or Messenger, and I'll be happy to answer the questions that I missed. And yeah, it's been really wonderful. And thank you so much again, Akriti and Sanchit, for having me.
On behalf of Townscript, thanks a lot, Chris, for doing this with us. The best part is that you've tested the waters and we know now what works and what does not. And I'm sure your inputs are extremely valuable for everyone who attended this webinar. Wish you all the very best with Mass Participation Asia and with Masterclass, Chris.
Thank you so much, Akriti. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. I was supposed to have turned my video on, but I didn't. So I'm waving at you if you can't see me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris.